Come on in, JD. First, I seen him wandering around in here. I know why he's here. All righty. Anybody besides Mom know the new memory verse? That awful. You didn't even read your lesson. Back cupboard. Let me get you one. Pops, while I'm doing that, you can read. Can you read the memory verse, Pops?
Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, faithful God who keeps covenant, steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to a thousand generations.
You're welcome. There you go. Got to say the chapter and verse. All right, so last week we saw two sad accounts of continued rebellion of the Israelites against God while they were in the wilderness. Who can summarize what we learned from the account of Korah's rebellion? Rebelling against God's leaders and roles will be met with judgment. God has prescribed how he is to be worshipped, and we don't get to change that. Who can summarize what we learned about the account of the bronze serpent? It was the faith that healed them. Their complaints were met with judgment. But yet God showed mercy. We're going to move forward today with the Israelites headed north on their way to enter the promised land finally. Remember that God judged the people who were aged 20 and up and condemned them to die in the wilderness. So we're some 40 years later from when they spied on the land. The book of Deuteronomy is in part Moses recounting to the Israelites all that happened since they left Egypt. In chapter 2 in Deuteronomy, Moses says, "And the time from our leaving Kadesh Barron until we crossed the brook Zered was 38 years until the entire generation, that is, the men of war, had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. For indeed, the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from the camp until they had perished. Soon as all the men of war had perished and were dead from among the people, the Lord said to me, Today you are to cross the border of Moab at Ar." That's Deuteronomy 2:14 through 18. The accounts that we're going to look at today are from Numbers, but Numbers is also repeated again in Deuteronomy. So as the Israelites head north, they went around the land of Edom to the east. If you guys have your map from 2 weeks ago, they're all on there. They're now northeast of the Dead Sea, and word has reached the king of the Amorites. They move past Moab and are near Pisgah, Numbers 21, 18 through 20. Now the Edomites are descendants of who? Anybody remember? Esau, descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother. What about the Moabites and the Ammonites? Who are they descendants of? Lot's two daughters who had weird relations with their, That's those three groups that they move past. So we're going to be at Numbers 21, starting in verse 21. Just as the kings of Edom and Arad, the battle lines are drawn. So let's look at Numbers 21. 21 through 31. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into field or vineyard. We will not drink the water of the well. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through its territory. He gathered all his people together and went out against Israel to the wilderness and came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as the Ammonites, for the border of the Ammonites was strong. And Israel took all the cities, and Israel settled in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon and its villages. From Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab, and taken all of his land out of his hand, as far as Arnon. Therefore the ballad singers say, "Come to Heshbon, let it be built. Let the city of Sihon be established. For fire came out of Heshbon, flames from the city of Sihon. It devoured Ar of the Moab, and swallowed the heights of the Arnon. Woe to you, O Moab! You are undone, O people of Chemosh. He has made his sons fugitives and his daughters captive to an Amorite king, Sihon. So we overthrew them, Heshbon, as far as Dibon. Perished, we laid waste as far as Nephar. Fire spread as far as Medeb. Thus Israel lived in the land of the Amorites." So, who does Israel refer to in these passages? It's not Israel the person anymore. It's Israel the nation, the Jews, all the Jewish people. What did they ask of King Sihon of the Amorites? They just wanted to pass through. Didn't want to fight, didn't want a war, didn't want to take anything, just wanted to go through their territory. But how did he respond? Nope, he wanted to fight. Of course, that would be scary, 2 million people wanting to just pass through your land. Yep. Yeah. Even though Israel promised not to veer off the highway, he was still scared, so he decided war was a better option. It was the wrong option for him. What happened? They lost. Now Israel took all the land. What switch happens in verses 27 through 30? Switches from a narrative to a song. Song about their victory. So that's how the Amorites under Sihon fared as they challenged the Israelites. Let's move to the next confrontation. We're going to read it out of Numbers 21, 32 through 35, but again, it's repeated in Deuteronomy, I think, chapter 3. Numbers 21, 32. And Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they captured its villages and disposed of the Amorites who were there. Then they turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against them, he and all his people, to the battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, "Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and all his land. And you shall do to him as you said to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon." So they defeated him and his sons and all his people until he had no survivors left, and they possessed the land. So what other city of the Amorites was conquered? What city's mentioned? Jazer. And where are the Israelites headed? Bashan, yep. Who then comes against them? Og, the king of Bashan. And the battle was in Edrei. How did Moses know that they would be victorious? Because they had God behind them, but God also specifically told them He's given them over into their hands. And then how did the battle turn out? They won, just as God had told Moses. Now, if we switch to Deuteronomy in this account, chapter 3, that gives us a few more details. So let's look at Deuteronomy 3, 4 through 11. And we took all the cities at that time. There was not a city that we did not take from them. 60 cities, the whole region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides very many unwalled villages. And we devoted them to destruction, as we did to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, devoting to destruction every city, man, woman, and children. But all the livestock and spoils of the cities we took as our plunder. So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians called Mount Hermon, while the Amorites called it Senir. All the cities of the tableland, and all Gilead, and all Bashan, as far as Salek and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. It is not in Rabab, but the Ammonites. 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits was its breadth, according to the common cubit. So how many cities were there that the Israelites just took over? Cities. Deuteronomy tells us. 3 verse 4, I think it is. 60. Yeah, 60 cities. And that's just the walled ones, the fortified ones. Who of, it doesn't give us the name of all 60, unless you got more than me, but it only names a few of them in numbers. Who was all killed in the battles? On Og's side. Men, women, and children. What did they not destroy? The animals, the livestock. They took it as plunder. What mountain is mentioned? Mount Hermon, yep. What do we learn about Og? He was a really big dude. He was the last of the Rephaim, a line of giants according to Genesis chapter 14. His bed was 13 feet long, which puts him somewhere between 9 and 12 foot. He was a big dude. Yeah, I'd be a munchkin. What was significant in defeating the giant king and the fortified cities? What did the spies fear, 10 of them, when they came out after looking at the land? They were afraid of the giants, and their cities were too fortified. So they're not even in the promised land yet. They're on their way. And what did they wipe out as the second opponent? Giants and fortified cities. They knew him better than we. I would argue they knew him better than we do. They got to walk with him, follow him, listen to him. Yeah, yeah, they were terrified of him. They're rebellious like us. Think of Peter when he walked on water. He stayed on top of the water as long as he kept his eyes on God, but as soon as he deviated, he sunk. That is every person in every country and every time. As soon as they take their eyes off God, it all goes bad. So, yep. No, not as sophisticated as the fortified cities. They would have had whatever rudimentary ones they would have made at that point, or the ones they took from Egypt when they plundered it. Yeah, yeah. And that was to prove that it wasn't them winning the wars. All they did is walk in circles, and God brought the walls down. But do you have that faith in that moment of your life? Most of us don't. I mean, we look back at these stories like, man, these people were crazy. But if God tells you and leads your heart to, sell everything and move to Africa and witness there, most of us are going to struggle. Most of us are going to be, no, I think I misheard that, and be disobedient. We're no different. We just get to see theirs written on paper where ours are hidden. But we all struggle with the same thing they did. So there's a great deal of momentum gained as the people begin to move north and conquer the lands and the kings, and they do it only with God's help. Moses gave these lands to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. This is described in Deuteronomy 3, which we'll look at later when we actually get to it. God was guiding his people to victory over the Amorites as part of his judgment against their idolatrous practices. If you remember back in Genesis, the time of the Amorites is not full yet. Their sins weren't, God was still giving them grace. Well, their time's up. Now he's giving them judgment, and the judgment comes through Israel conquering them. While the Jordan River's the final border to cross into the Promised Land, there was one more king to come against the Israelites. Interestingly, God had told the Israelites not to fight against the Moabites, but the Israelites' presence in the encampment in Shittim, just across the Jordan from Jericho, frightens that very Moabite king. So that's what we're going to look at next, and most of you probably know this story. Balaam. We've all heard the story of Balaam. So Balak was the king of Moab. In the face of Israel on the edge of his land, he sought help from the Midianites. The Midianites were descendants of Abram's son to Keturah. Balak also sought the aid of Balaam, a false prophet from this area. Balak sent princes and money and everything to try to get Balaam to come and curse the people of God. So let's pick it up in 22, starting in verse 18. We'll do 18 through 23:12. But Balaam answered, so here's the second or third delegation that they send to Balaam to try to get him to come. Balak does. But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me a house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. So you too, please stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you to. So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the prince of Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. Now he was riding on a donkey, with his 2 servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road, with a drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. And Balaam struck the donkey to turn her into the road. And the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards and the wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall, pressing Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place, where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. And Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me. I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." And the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way?" And he said, "No." Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed down and fell on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside before me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live." Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now therefore, if it is evil in your sight, I will turn back." And the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with these men, but speak only the word that I tell you." So Balaam went on with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam had come, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab on the border formed by the Arnon at the extremity of the border. And Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send to you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" Balaam said to Balak, "Behold, I have come to you. Have I now any power of my own to speak anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, I must speak." Then Balaam went to Balak, and they came to Kirath-Huzoth. And Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep, and sent for Balaam and for the princes who were with him. And in the morning Balak took Balaam and brought him to Bamoth Baal, and from there he saw a fraction of the people. And Balaam said to Balak, "Build for me here 7 altars, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams." Balak stood as Balaam had said, and Balak and Balaam offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Balak said to Balak, "Stand beside your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I will tell you." And he went to a bare height. And God met with Balaam. And Balaam said to him, "I have arranged the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram." And the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth, and then returned Balak, and thus you shall speak. And he returned to him, and behold, he and all the princes of Moab were standing beside his burnt offering. And Balaam took up his discourse and said, "From Aram Balak has brought me, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? From the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I behold him. Behold, a people dwelling alone, and not counting itself amongst the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his." And Balak said to Balaam, What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies. Behold, you have done nothing but bless them." And he answered and said, Must I not take care to speak what the Lord puts in my mouth? So that's a lot. How does Balaam respond to Balak's offer of money to come and curse him? Turns it down at first. Even if you give me a house full of gold and silver, I can't do anything that God doesn't put in my mouth. How does Balaam describe God? Right at the beginning of that too. He is the Lord my God. He is Yahweh, the Lord my God. So he identifies God as his own God. So then why does Balaam leave to go to Moab? Because God tells him to. Tells him to go, but only speak what he's told. Was God pleased with Balaam leaving for Moab? Nope. His anger burns against him. So what's the reason for that anger? Doesn't tell you here, does it? Doing it for the wrong motives. You'll get that from Jude verse 11. If you read forward in the Bible in Jude, it tells you that his motives are not pure. And if you go a little further in Numbers, I think it's chapter 31, you'll see even though he speaks only what God tells him to speak and blesses only Israel, how does he get Israel to fall apart? Yep. He says, I can't bless them and I can't curse them, Balak, but if you send your women down, you can convince them to marry your women, which they weren't allowed to do, and you get them to worship your gods because their wives worship your gods, and therefore God's judgment will fall upon them. So if you want to know if his motives were true, no. He was in it for the money. He just had to find the right loophole that he can get to go through. So Balaam starts his course. How does his donkey behave? Yeah. Acts very strange. Runs off into a field, runs his leg into a brick wall, and then just lays down all of a sudden. What did the donkey see that Balaam didn't? So, who's the angel of the Lord? Jesus. It's a pre-incarnate Christ. How do I know that? Glad you asked. Anytime somebody falls down before an angel in worship, what does the angel say? Rise. Don't worship me. This angel does not say that. What else does he say? The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with these men, but speak only the word that I tell you. Well, he's only allowed to speak the word that God tells him. We already know that from earlier in the chapter. So if the angel says, speak only the word that I tell you, who's the angel? Has to be God. Well, it can't be God the Father, because what would happen to Balaam if he saw God the Father on the road? He'd be gone. Yep. Nobody can stand before God the Father and live in our sinful nature. So it has to be a pre-incarnate Christ. A lot of times when you see the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, it's a clue right there. If it's the angel, you'll see an angel quite a bit. But when it says the, it's usually talking about a pre-incarnate Christ. So I don't think, because God didn't open his eyes to see, but he opened a donkey's eyes. I think the point was he should have known his donkey, something he spent all of his time with since his youth, and he should have known something was awry even though he couldn't see what it was. But instead, he strikes out in anger because he wants to get there because there's a blessing in it in the form of money from Balak, and he's being delayed. I think his eyes truly weren't open. Yeah. Yeah. Like we can't see the angels that are around us, but we're told they're here. You know. What's that? I, I, I don't know, but I don't think. I mean, if animals could see the angels, imagine the fear they would have. Because every time humans see angels, it's not a happy experience. It's always fearful. We draw them up as these little cupids that hang on trees, but it's not the way the Bible describes them. I mean, everybody falls on their face in fear when they see an angel. So if our pets could see angels, they'd probably act crazy all the time. Yeah, but even Jesus said, if the people won't cry out to me, the rocks will. You know. I no, I don't know where they get that from. Hmm. Every time a bell rings, an angel no, no, doesn't work that way. People come up with a lot of crazy stuff. No. Hallmark's good at that, yeah. So do you find it odd that the donkey speaks? Yeah. That is the more odd part that I find. Not so much that the donkey speaks, but he just has a regular conversation like it's no big deal. He starts talking like, yeah, not even weird. He just, yeah. Yeah. That's the part I find the oddest, yeah. Nope, I'm not, my donkey starts talking, I'm leaving. I'm not sitting there having a conversation, but he has no problem with it. So when does Balaam's attitude change? He argues with the donkey, makes a fool out of him, wish he has a sword to kill him. The moment God opens his eyes and he sees the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword. That would be terrifying. Hmm. But we can. We can. It was Elijah and Elisha, wasn't it? Surrounded by armies. And Elijah wasn't scared, but Elisha was terrified. And Elijah prays that Elisha's eyes get open. And he sees right behind the whole armies that are coming to kill him, an army 4 times the size of angels. Neither one of them freaked out. Elijah, which seen him beforehand, or Elisha, which seen him when his eyes were open. They didn't panic. Yeah. So, I mean, it's all in context. Now, if an angel's standing there against you, yeah, that's a little terrifying. Which is all fallen angels, all demons, as we call them nowadays. No, no. Yeah, he admitted, I mean, I sinned against you, I'm sorry, but a couple chapters later, he's finding his loopholes to continue doing it. Much like most of us. Most people in all of history, we don't stay on that straight and narrow path very long. We just don't have a donkey to help us out. So let's look at 2 Peter 2:15. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain for wrongdoing. This is one of the verses where you learn Balaam's intent. He wanted gain or money, wealth, power. He didn't care how he got it. Fast forward to Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. But I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. So we learn there, what I already told you guys, that Balaam later in Numbers teaches Balak how to get Israel to stumble. Marry people they weren't supposed to, worship false gods. It's Israel's problem for the whole New Testament. It's what we'll deal with for the next couple of years. They never learn. So, back to Numbers. What did Balak want Balaam to do? Curse Israel. After offering the sacrifices on the 7 altars, what did Balaam then announce? Did he curse Israel? No, he announces a blessing upon them. And where'd that blessing come from? Yep, the Lord put the words in Balaam's mouth. 23, verse 5. How did Balak feel about the blessing? He was mad. Yeah, he's paying them all this money, brought him out there, and he's doing exactly the opposite of what he's supposed to. So as the account continues, Balak tells Balaam, takes him to 3 more places where 7 altars are constructed and sacrifices are offered, and each time Balaam announces a blessing instead of a curse. In the second oracle, the power of God supporting Israel is the emphasis. In the third, God's establishing of Israel before all of the nations is described. After a rebuke from Balak, Balaam provides a 4th oracle in which he gives a near and far prophecy. Chapter 24, verses 15 through 24. And there he speaks of a scepter that will rise out of Israel and crush Moab. Anybody know what the future fulfillment of that is? The near one. Who crushes Moab? Famous king who fought a giant. King David. He is the near. He crushes Moab when he comes to power. What's the far fulfillment? Christ. So we've seen a Christophany in this, and now we see a prophecy of Christ coming, even all the way back before Israel took the land. Wish we had time to do the what you believe activity. Because what do you say when people say you're so ridiculous that you believe in a book that tells you snakes and donkeys can talk? Huh? It's not a far stretch. If he can create everything from nothing, he can make whatever speaks he wants to speak. Yeah. Yeah, but that one usually ends the conversation because then they're insulted. Now you just insulted them. Because I have one that's much like that. Wait a minute, you're worried about me with donkeys and stuff, and you believe nothing blew up and became everything, and I'm the one that's crazy? But that usually ends the conversation too. So, softer ways. That way you can keep the conversation going. But yeah, yours is good. If a God can create everything, he can make any animal speak he wants. And first, who was the snake speaking, or was somebody speaking through him? The devil spoke through him. Was the donkey speaking, or was somebody speaking through him? Through him, yeah. So, fast forward to Daniel, and a hand appears and writes on the wall to get what God once said. God can say whatever he wants, however he wants, whenever he wants. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't need our permission. So if he is exactly God, then obviously he has to have that power. You know? By night and a pillar of smoke by day. Mhm. Part the sea, which isn't the bigger part of the miracle. The bigger part of the miracle is they walk through on dry ground, something that's been underwater for 1,000 years, and they just walk through it like it's dry ground. Parting the water is one thing. You can do that with wind, earthquakes, waves. You can move water very easily. Yeah, but you can't make the ground dry. Yeah, yeah. So making a donkey talk is small in comparison. All right. Let me go cut her off. Mom, you want to close us in prayer?